Good evening, everyone. So just as a reminder, we are recording. So if you turn on your mic or say something, you might end up in the recording, just FYI. But otherwise, it's just going to be me. So a few things. Keep your microphone muted. Unless you need to tell me something. You can also communicate with me via the chat. All right, so you can use the chat box, but if I don't see your message, then just unmute and let me know that you have a question for me. The props I'd like you to have for today's class are these: a bolster like this, a blanket like this one, couple of blocks, and I don't think you'll need a strap. So these are the props, okay? Again, I say this every week, but it's as true this week as it was in prior weeks. If you don't already have some props, buy them. Just go get them. The studios don't have props anymore because of COVID and the fear of spreading that stuff around. And you guys are all doing yoga at home. How many yoga classes have you done at home? And they mentioned a prop and you didn't have one. So they're going to last you a lifetime. Just buy, good quality props. I don't think they're that expensive in the scheme of things. Again, especially something that lasts you. What's the last thing you bought that's going to last you a lifetime? Your car is not going to last you a lifetime, and that's a very expensive thing. So just invest in them. When you go back to the studios, you're going to have to use them. And when you're practicing at home, they're very good. But if you don't have them today, you could use like a couch pillow instead of the bolster, maybe a beach towel instead of the blanket. Blocks, those are the hardest things to fabricate at home. So that's probably the first thing that you might purchase is a set of blocks. And that's probably also the cheapest thing. Most expensive thing is the bolster. But, even that you can find for relatively cheap. But remember, you often get what you pay for. So if you get some flimsy, cheap bolster, it may not be much better than no bolster at all. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Today we're doing a flow for the spine. I do this one, on a regular basis because it's really important for us to work with our spine. And we'll start with a butterfly pose. So feel free to play whatever music you like as long as your microphone is muted. Join your feet together, push your feet out, and then just let your upper body relax forward and down. Some ways that you can explore using the props are blocks under your knees, blocks under your forearms, a block under your forehead, resting your upper body on a bolster, sitting on a block blanket, or even the bolster to push you forward a little more. Okay, you're welcome to try any of those things out and see how they feel. In all honesty, you really don't know how they will affect your body until you try them. Sometimes our bodies are unique. And this is the problem with slavishly listening to what somebody says. So I've been teaching yoga for a while now, and I've seen certain trends and things come and go in popularity. And so there was a little while there where there was a huge trend toward what is called alignment in yoga. Now, alignment is just one of many tools that we use. It is a useful tool. But like most tools, it can be overused. Okay, now I know some people, who do yoga, if they heard me saying that, their head would go because they're all about alignment. And I'm not trying to criticize anybody or tell anybody they're wrong. So if that's you, if alignment's your thing, more power to you. Okay, this is just my opinion. It's also my experience. It's also the experience of my teachers. So This isn't coming out of nowhere. I'm not the only one who feels this way. Okay? Just to be clear. And it's okay for us to have different opinions. We live in a time now where what many people are calling cancel culture. What is cancel culture? Cancel culture is where if someone disagrees with me, I try and delete them. I try and cancel them. And there are many ways that I do that. I defriend you on Facebook. I troll or flame you on, on some social media platform. I, write all kinds of nasty things and I try and put you down. If you work someplace and I can get you fired, I try and get you fired because you have a different opinion than me. You have a different point of view than me. This is really ugly, in my opinion. We have to learn to agree to disagree. And many people who consider themselves liberals and consider themselves open-minded and consider themselves loving, compassionate, accepting people think that they can reserve that compassion and lovingness and all that for people that agree with them. And if you are a conservative or you are someone who has a different point of view about gay rights or women or race, then I can feel free to hate you. And I'm still that loving, compassionate liberal. Well, forget about it. Okay? Loving, compassionate, that's for everybody if you're really loving and compassionate. Okay? Even someone who disagrees with you. They might be very confused. I'm not saying I agree with those points of view. But you need to be really careful about thinking that you are accepting of all people, but you're not accepting of a conservative viewpoint. Okay? And again, I'm not saying I agree with that viewpoint. Okay? But this is something that many people who consider themselves liberal or progressive, it's a trap that they fall into. They accept everything except being conservative. They accept everything except someone who might have a different point of view. All right? So if we're really going to be open-minded, then that means being open-minded across the board. All right? So with alignment, what can happen is we end up doing things with our body that are perhaps right for someone else, but are not right for us. And when we slavishly follow someone else's experience and their point of view, then we can end up in a really bad position. And I've seen this happen in yoga, where people will say, you're doing that pose wrong. And you say, how do you know that? And they say, because so-and-so says. So-and-so says it's supposed to be done like this. And so-and-so has been different people over the years. I'm not going to name any names, but trust me, some of these big name teachers, because they say triangle pose is done this way, then hundreds, if not thousands of teachers leave, that working with this person, and they go around telling everyone that they're doing that pose wrong because so-and-so said it needs to be done that way. All right, let's go ahead and come on up. We're going to take our legs straight, and we will just come forward and down, nice and relaxed. We're stretching the back side of the spine here, okay? Nice and relaxed. You don't need to pull or push yourself into it. In fact, I discourage you from doing so. Again, you can use your props to support your body. And what you want here is just time. Time to let things stretch out. Okay, so you're stretching the back side of your spine, nice and gentle. All right, now the point of me saying all that is that you might be unique, you might be different. And just because I say something about what you should be feeling or experiencing or what most people feel or experience, it doesn't mean that's what you're going to experience. So that's why sooner or later in your practice, it's a very good idea that, if I'm talking about the props, that you actually try them out for yourself. You may think you know what your experience will be, but you might find that in reality, your experience is very different than either what you thought or what the teacher or whoever it is telling you what you're supposed to experience is. And that's fine. That's normal. Okay. And it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It doesn't mean that you're, doing it wrong necessarily. You might be. And that's why we want to be open in terms of communication with our teachers. And we want a dialogue happening. It's not like maybe when you were in school, it was sort of like the teacher was just there and, lecturing, and we're just taking notes, and whatever the teacher says is right, and we just need to write it down. As I've said many times in the past, when I give these talks and things, it's not about me being right about anything, and I'm not asking you to agree with everything that I say. It is about pointing to certain things and trying to get us to sort of wake up out of a collective slumber that humanity is in. And we tend to be in this slumber again because oftentimes we aren't questioning things and we aren't looking very deeply into things. And this is where, again, earlier I referred to, sort of liberal and conservative points of view. We fall into these groups and then we often identify with them, and then we go into a kind of sleep. And we often get told by the collective what to think and how to feel about certain things. And we can end up in a kind of echo chamber where the only people we're willing to listen to or dialogue with are people who already are within our group and already share our views. And we might like that very much because generally the ego likes thinking that it's right, and it likes having people agree with it. And it also likes to hate other people, to have a kind of a out group. And this is what we might call tribalism. And this is very ingrained in the egoic structure. Now, the egoic structure is an important thing to understand from a yogic perspective, because from the yogic perspective, it is the egoic structure that causes us suffering ultimately. So we want to be aware of how it works and the ways that it sort of strengthens itself. And again, one of the ways it strengthens itself is by creating an in-group and an out-group, by creating a self and another. And so again, there are many ways in which it does this. The ego is a shapeshifter. It's really brilliant in the way that it works. And it really doesn't, it's not like a thing. You can't like put your finger on the ego. It really is a multitude of different thoughts and feelings and things, kind of like a cloud that we have that's in our heart and mind. And it gives us this illusion that there's a separate self here, and, the separate self of Douglas. And everything else is out there. So Douglas is here and everything else is out there. And Douglas needs to try and fight for survival against everything else. And then, Douglas might find some friends, some people who are on his side, some people who agree with him politically, and we join forces and try and defeat the forces of evil. Again, this is the fantasy that the ego loves to live, and many of us are living this fantasy. But as we get deeper into yoga, this fantasy starts to break apart. It really does. This idea that we're the righteous, we're the right, we're the ones fighting for good. And if we look deeper, we can often find the subtle ways in which we really aren't on the side of unity, the ways in which we are creating division constantly in our lives. And yoga isn't about social or political change. Some people are, trying to make it about that. It's really about personal transformation. It's about changing your heart and your mind. And it does a very good job of that if we let it. All right, let's unwind and we'll come back onto our back and let's just relax for a moment. It's called a rebound. Close the eyes, feel the rebound. The rebound can often be felt physically, mentally, emotionally. And what we want to do is introspect. So as I said in the last class, introspection is when we are more focused and interested in our own reactions than we are to whatever it is that we think caused the reaction. So if I said something that caused a strong feeling in you, instead of focusing on me, oh, that he shouldn't have said that, or whatever it is, you focus on your own reaction. Why do I feel this way? Isn't that interesting? Where do I feel that in my body? What sorts of thoughts or assumptions might I be making about life or justice or what's right or wrong or about myself and other people that might be causing me to feel that way? That's introspection. And that is one of our most important tools in yoga. All right, let's bring our legs in. We'll give them a little squeeze, and we're just going to shake it off with a little bit of movement. Okay, just whatever feels right in your body, whatever feels good right now. Just follow your instincts. Listen to your body. Good, and then let's go ahead and we will hinge up to seated. Oh no, sorry. Go ahead and stay on your back. We're going to do banana next. So move your hips over to the right side of your mat. And then what I'd like you to do is take your left leg and just move it out to the left. Exactly how far, again, is going to depend on your body. We take the right ankle, cross it over the left, and then you'll reach up and grab your right wrist with your left hand. And what I'd like you to do is just move yourself over. And you want to feel stretch here in your right waist. Okay? Just a nice stretch. It doesn't need to be super intense. There usually isn't much use for the props in this posture, but if you find a use for them, you're welcome to use them. And again, as always, we want to be sure that what we're feeling is within the range of what we consider safe for our body. And then we also want to be sure that we feel the stretch. Okay, and as long as those two qualities are met, you're in what we call banana pose, and it should be effective and safe. All right, so again, it's not about which side of the political spectrum you're on or who's right or wrong or anything like that. I just bring that up because today in our country, politics is one of the main sources of division. And one way of describing yoga is unity consciousness. When we really get deep enough into yoga, our sense of separation begins to dissolve. When we really know our true nature, then we know that the true nature in everyone else, even the most horrible, hardened criminal, and this is what people don't like to hear, because people like to think, no, I'm a good person and that's a bad person, and we are inherently different. Well, sorry. Yoga is going to say that that's not really true. And again, people don't like hearing that, but this is the truth from a yogic perspective. So if someone is coming from a place of division, and again, they are seeing separation, we make a huge mistake if we then create a division between ourselves and them. I'm not saying that they're not wrong, because again, yoga is ultimately about unity consciousness. So any kind of division is ultimately a mistake from the yogic perspective. But again, the ego is a shapeshifter. So I come to realize that maybe a place where I once thought there was division, I realize that there isn't. So again, let's just take an example. Like, let's say that I used to think that, I used to be against gay rights. I've never been that way. Okay, so this is just an example. Let's just say that I was against it. And then I realized that, okay, that's not a very unifying point of view, to think that this whole group of people are somehow wrong or different or sinners or whatever it is. And then I begin to feel unity with this group of people who I used to feel division with. But then let's say I turn around and I say, well, anyone who doesn't see things the way I see, I'm going to feel a sense of division with them. Well, I'm right back in the same boat, aren't I? And again, this is what I was talking about earlier. And my feeling is that many, many people who do yoga identify again as progressive and liberal. It's not true across the board. I know that I have students who are more conservative. And you don't have to be liberal or conservative to do yoga. It just happens that that's often the case. So this is often the place where, again, someone who's more progressive or liberal might fall into this egoic trap of thinking that a conservative is their enemy. A conservative point of view is, something they don't have to listen to, something that they can just flat out disregard. And again, I'm not saying I'm a fan of that point of view, but it is, that's a place where we create division. So it's really hard work to do this type of yoga where we're always searching for where are we creating division. But this is the deeper part of yoga practice. On the surface, it's just about stretching and doing some postures to start. We begin to feel a little bit better. But I have a friend who likes to say you get 2 years of asana bliss. That's what most people get. They start doing yoga, they start doing postures, they start to feel amazing, and that lasts about 2 years. And then after about 2 years, you get used to it, and it's like, okay, what next? And so sometimes people try and start doing a different type of asana. They start trying to do harder asana. They try and do more asana, but you're probably not going to recapture that again. You need to go deeper. All right, let's go ahead and switch sides. Okay, so your hips come over to the left side of your mat. And then you bring your right leg out to the right. You cross your left ankle over. You reach up, you grab the left wrist with your right hand. And again, how far you need to go before you feel a stretch, that's going to differ from person to person. So this is where many people are in the United States today. They think that yoga is just about doing some postures. And when it comes time to do the deeper work, which is the more psychological work that I'm talking about, they never get around to it. Now, there are several steps between doing postures and doing the kind of deep psychological work I'm talking about. So if we're not ready, then there are several other things that we could do. And if we have a good teacher, they could guide us in that process of, okay, well, what's the next thing I should try, or what's the next thing I should do? My approach is always, whenever students think that they're ready for more, I try and basically throw them into the deep end and see if they can swim. And then if they can't, then we try and work on, okay, what sorts of things can we do to help? Do I need to give you a floaty? Do you need a life vest? If I get in the pool with you, what would allow you to stay as much in the deep end as possible? And some people need to come back, almost all the way, and that's fine. Again, we're all different in terms of what we need. And again, my feeling is a good teacher can help us address that, what we need to keep walking this path. Now, why would we want to walk this path? Well, as I said earlier, in my experience, the ego is basically the source of our suffering. And so ideally, we want to uproot the ego. And that very often can be a very slow, arduous process. And again, there are a lot of pitfalls. So I was trying to point one out to you earlier in the class today, this idea of separation. If I think there are good people out there or bad people out there, but I'm a good person, or I think there are good people out there and I'm a bad person, all these types of thinking, this is all part of that same egoic complex and structure that creates the illusion of separation. And it's very important for us to understand it is an illusion. And this is Yoga 101. This is straight up yoga. There really isn't a separation, not in the way that we perceive it. And the experience of yoga means to yoke, to bring together, to join together. And there are many levels in which this happens. So when we start doing asanas and postures, and let's say we're doing a vinyasa class can bring together the breath, which is our vital life force energy, what we call prana, movement, and the body and the mind. So in a good vinyasa class, a good flow class, we bring the breath, the mind, the energy, and the body together. Okay, we unify them. And that's on one level in which yoga could be said to be happening. All right. But on another level, yoga, you might say on the deepest level, is the bringing together of your individual soul or consciousness, spirit, whatever you want to call it, with the oversoul, the unity consciousness, what you might call God. You can call it whatever you want, source. You could say universe. You could say Tao. You could say Brahman in the yoga tradition. So when we unite with this larger sense of self, then we have achieved the goal of yoga practice. Now, sometimes when people hear me speak like that, they think that that's something that's not possible for them. I was listening to a talk that very popular author, Eckhart Tolle, he was talking with a woman who she had invested all of her life savings with Bernie Madoff. Maybe you remember him. He ran a sort of Ponzi scheme and he ripped a lot of people off and they lost all their money. So she was one of them. And because she lost all her money, she ended up having a spiritual awakening thanks to Bernie Madoff. But she was saying, yeah, she was spiritual before that. And she said, yeah, I had heard you say, that this was our true nature. She's like, but I don't know that I really believed it. I sort of felt like, yeah, well, maybe it's everyone's true nature, but maybe not mine. And then when she lost everything, her ego really didn't have anything to hang on to anymore. And it dissolved. And she experienced the truth of her true nature. It's the nature of all things. All right, let's unwind from that. So our true nature is the nature of the liberal. It's the nature of the conservative. It's the nature of the yellow person, the red person, the white person, the black person, the chipmunk, the squirrel, the tree, the stars, the planet, everything. And again, once we experience that, there really isn't another, not in the way that we think of it and experience it from the egoic perspective. And this is really what all yoga is about. And that's why we develop a lot of patience and a lot of compassion, even for people that have a different point of view from us. We might see that they're very confused, and we might see that they're suffering from the separation that they're creating. And that usually brings a lot of fear in. And if you look at people who, who you think are creating more separation than you might see that they look very afraid. They might even look really miserable. And so again, this is a place where as yogis, not as normal people, because normal people, they're going to go around and judge and whatever. But if you're a yogi, you're not normal. You're really trying to come from a different place and trying to learn a different way of viewing things. And so that's where we begin to cultivate that compassion. All right, let's bring our legs in. We'll give them a little squeeze. We're going to shake it out. Move around a little bit. I know it can be hard to feel compassion for someone who you think has very little, right? It can be very tempting to say that, someone who maybe seems to be promoting hate. It seems like you should meet that with hate. But this isn't the yogic way. It just isn't. I'm sorry, that's just not the way that it is. This is really about a different approach to things. All right, so let's go ahead and hinge on up, and then we're going to come into a tabletop position. And let's just move around a little bit in our bear pose. Shake it off. Stretch and move. Get into those spots where you might be feeling tight or tense in your body. Try and get some blood flow in there. And then when you're done with that, you can tuck those toes, lift the hips, and stretch out a little bit. Stretch the toes and the ankles, the knees, and the hips. And then from there, we'll come forward onto our belly for Sphinx. I'm going to move my props over here because I'll probably end up using them. All right, so we come onto our belly, we prop ourselves up on the elbows. This is a back bend that we call Sphinx. So again, we continue to work the spine. And back bending is super important for our spinal health. We generally don't get enough of it. So this is a really good opportunity for us. Let's look at some modifications for this posture. One is I can just take my arms straighter. So if I'm not getting enough back bend, I could do that. That's called a seal pose. My legs could be together or apart. They could be straight. Well, generally they're straight. My shoulders can be depressed or relaxed. My head held up, drop forward or drop back. I can prop my elbows up on something, right? Push me back a little bit further into the pose. Now again, I want to feel it in my back, but I don't want too much, okay? So I don't want to feel too much in my back. Just a little bit of compression, just enough to stimulate the body to strengthen that part of my body. And that's called an edge. So when we're at that point where we're feeling the posture and we still feel that we're within the range of what is safe for us, not necessarily comfortable, but safe, then we are at our edge, okay? All right, good. So again, what I'm talking about has nothing to do with, what groups you support or don't support, or, any kind of social activism that you might be doing. You might continue to do whatever it is that you're doing. I'm not suggesting that that's not a good idea and needed and important, but it really is much more on a personal basis. It's really much more about what is in your heart and in your mind. And where are we creating division? Where are we actually creating hatred? And again, you might think that it's okay to hate, but I'm telling you, it's not okay. You can defeat hatred. And in fact, I think the only way that you do defeat hatred is with love. I'm sorry that that's the case. Like I often say, I didn't come up with these rules. I'm just reporting on them. Okay? Don't shoot the messenger. So you might not like that idea, but I think we've seen many examples of how this works. There have been many great souls who, in the face of adversity, in the face of opportunities to hate the other, they choose love above hatred. And they create a lot of powerful change as a result. So this is generally the yogic way. Not to hate hate. It doesn't mean that we have to encourage hatred, or it doesn't mean we have to encourage, or say, oh, it's all the same, everything's fine, everything's okay. But in our own hearts and minds, we really want to find, where that resistance, where that contraction is happening. Because that's how the ego strengthens itself. That's how it creates this illusion of separation, this illusion of self and other. It's said in Buddhism that when you become fully enlightened, you realize that everyone else is also enlightened. Isn't that an interesting statement? When you look around the world today, when you look at Facebook, your Facebook feed, when you turn on the news, do you see that everyone's enlightened? Probably not. And what that means from a yogic perspective, from a Buddhist perspective, you have a lot of work to do in your own heart and mind. It doesn't mean that the world isn't very, very confused. It is. It absolutely is. And we are at a point where the ego is just raging. But do you want to be part of the solution or part of the problem? If you want to be part of the problem, then continue hating hatred. Continue seeing separation. Continue seeing all the ignorance and all the problems in the world. If you want to be part of the solution, then you need to start focusing on what's right, and you need to start focusing on your own heart and mind more, and cleaning up your own heart and mind. And then you'll be amazed at how your experience of the world begins to change. All right, let's go ahead and come on down. Take a rest on your belly for a moment, and then we'll transition into a rather challenging posture that is also highly, highly therapeutic. So generally speaking, it's worth the effort, okay? And that's called a saddle pose. But I'm just going to set this stuff up. You just relax for the moment, and then I'll talk you into it. All right, everyone. So go ahead and press back into a kneeling position. Again, this is a good reason why we want to have our props. Sorry, my head is cut off, but it's much more important that you see what I'm doing with my body. All right. So we sit back into a kneeling position, and you can kneel on your heels. You can kneel between your heels. You could also sit on a block that is between the heels. Okay, all of those positions are perfectly fine. There are two areas that tend to give people trouble, the knees and the ankles. So if your ankles hurt, you notice that I've rolled up a blanket, put it under my ankles. That reduces a flexion here at this joint. And so if this joint is not very flexible, then it gives it a break. It also pads my feet a little bit. So if the bones in my feet pressing into the ground is painful, then I can do that. This also works if it's not the ankle, but just the feet. You can just add a little bit of padding, which would look like that, okay? If you don't need the padding, then just don't use the blanket. It's as simple as that. If your knees hurt, again, sitting on a block or trying to take your knees wider are two solutions that often help, okay? Once you're okay with your ankles and your knees, you want to check and see if you feel a stretch in the front of your thighs. And if you do, I want you to just stay right there. If you don't, experiment with coming back into your hands, maybe to your elbows, or perhaps you come back onto this, which I like to call a yoga recliner or yoga lazy boy. Pretty comfortable. And again, I can stop here if I feel the stretch in the front of my thighs, or I begin to feel it in my back. I don't feel it in either. That's just me. So I would need to go further. And the first thing I could try is getting rid of this block. So now I come back here, and now I do feel it in my back, and not really so much in my thighs, but it's actually the back that we're going for. The reason I mentioned the thighs earlier is because that's a limiting factor. If my thighs are really tight, then I'm just not going to be able to go back very far. So I could still get rid of this and ultimately come back all the way back onto my back, which would look like that, which is how I'm going to do the pose today. Now, this is one of my favorite postures. It's called saddle pose. And again, my feet, my toes could point back. They could point out to the sides where we want to feel it in our low back. So back here just a little bit. Generally, this affects the sacral region, which is kind of that lowest part of our spine. So hopefully you can feel it there. And again, you don't want to feel that you are in any way harming yourself, harming your body, or asking your body to do more than it's ready to do, okay? So again, I always like to say that compassion really starts with us, and that may not be what you think. It may not mean what you think it means, and it may not happen the way that you think it happens. Sometimes I see people, saying that they're trying to practice self-love, and they do it in interesting ways, basically oftentimes trying to glorify the body, or trying to get okay with their body image. Not that there's anything wrong with getting okay with your body image, but there's much more to the self than just accepting our body, the image of our body, or how our body is. No doubt in our culture, many people have body issues. So that can be a big thing that people need to address. But in my experience, really that compassion starts when we begin meditating, and our meditation begins really taking us deeper. And generally what starts to happen is we begin to see things that we don't like inside our own heart and our own mind. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Hatred. Hatred just does not feel good, folks. Period. It doesn't matter what you're hating. It really doesn't. It just does not feel good. And so we can begin to look into our own heart and mind, and we might begin to see just how judgmental the ego is, just how quickly it judges a situation or a person, just how afraid it is, how ugly it is. And the funny thing is all egos are the same, basically. So, it's not like you're alone. Of course, everyone is trying to put their best face forward. So they're not saying these things out loud, but they're still thinking them. And so what happens is when we are not meditators, we're not yogis, and we don't have much self-awareness, all of this stuff runs under the radar. And our ego is just constantly stroking us. You're a good person. You're a nice person. People like you. And that might include body image too, right? Oh, you're beautiful. Oh, you're such a great person. Stroke, stroke, stroke. The thing is, the ego can turn on you like that. So you get one negative comment. Maybe you got a new dress and you're really happy with how it looks. And then you go to your parents, for a night out, and you wear your new dress. You're so happy with it. And then your mom says, "You're not wearing that, are you?" And then all of a sudden, big hole in that big balloon. The ego is puffing up. And then you feel bad. And maybe you feel bad and you attack your mom, or maybe you attack yourself. That's generally the way the ego works. How dare you say that, mom? Blah, blah, blah. Or, oh, I didn't realize this wasn't appropriate, and you attack yourself. You feel bad. Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. I'm wearing this dress and apparently my mom hates it. So again, as we begin to meditate, we become more aware of these workings of the ego. And a very common experience for people is they begin to feel very poorly about themselves. Because again, they think that that's them. And they think, God, man, I have all these horrible thoughts about things. And I don't feel like a very good person. Let's unwind. Just rest on your back for a moment. Another common thing that happens is the ego likes to think that it's in control, and it really isn't in control of anything. So as we begin to see this stuff, right, we might say, well, I'm going to change that. Maybe I see a pattern where every time I get stressed out, I stress eat, and I finish a whole carton of Ben & Jerry's ice cream on my own. And maybe before I started meditating, I was fine with it. But one of my goals has been to lose weight or to eat healthier. I begin meditating. I begin to see this pattern. Oh, every time I get stressed out, I go to the fridge. I eat a whole carton of ice cream. I shouldn't do that anymore. Well, it can be really frustrating and kind of disconcerting when we realize that, wow, I can't stop that. I see it happening, and yet I still continue to do it. Or maybe you realize that you don't talk very nicely to your parents. You kind of realize that you yell at them, or they trigger you, and you start screaming at them. You recognize that at a certain point, and you say, I'm going to stop talking to my parents that way. Then the next time you get on the phone with your parents, the same thing happens. That can be really enlightening when we realize that we don't have nearly as much control as we think we have. And we might even realize we don't have any control. All right, let's get into our next posture. Let's bring the legs in, give them a little squeeze, shake it out. Again, a little bit of movement here goes a long way. And then we will cross our right leg over our left leg, and we're just going to drop our knees down to the left as we come into what we call twisted roots. We're twisting the spine now again. Physically, the whole class, we've been exercising our spine. All right? So we've been working out our spine, so to speak. And there isn't any way we need to breathe. There isn't anything in particular we need to be focused on. You don't even really need to be listening to me as I ramble on about all this stuff, unless you want to. My talks are not meant, it's not like you're going to get a quiz later. It's not really for your mind per se. It's really to try and elicit something from deeper inside of you, to get something deep inside you to start to move or to wake up. And this is why sometimes on the egoic layer, it can actually be upsetting, a talk like this. We can actually find ourselves triggered. We can find ourselves with strong emotional reactions, wanting to disagree. And again, I'm not saying I'm right about everything. That's not the point of a talk like this. So again, we live in cancel culture. Many people, sometimes I get nasty email from students, they hear me give a talk and they're like, he talked about politics and I don't want to hear politics in my yoga. Well, we really can't separate these things, can we? We can try, we can pretend like while we're doing yoga that the world outside doesn't exist. And some people like to do yoga that way. And those people should probably not take class with me. There are different ways of teaching. And I'm not saying my way is the right way, but it is a way. It is a way, and it does work. So again, we can relax and just sort of go with the flow. And my hope is always to benefit you. Everything that I do in class, everything I say is ultimately to try and benefit you. Okay, so again, before we create a sense of separation, before we try and cancel each other out, let's recognize this shared intention. You have come here to try and benefit yourself, and I have come here to try and benefit you as well. Whether you see that or not, whether you think that's happening or not, that's a different story. And again, we might have different opinions about that, and that's okay. We can still love one another. That's the beauty of it. I have people in my family who I love very much who are on the opposite side of the political spectrum. And I've had instances where they try and shut me down. Not in a rude or mean way. I mean, they love me too. But they'll say things like, oh, well, this conversation isn't going anywhere. And I will say, don't do that. We need to talk about this. We don't have to agree, and we may not get anywhere, but we need to take the time to try and understand one another's perspective. And maybe I will be the one who ends up changing my mind, and I'm open to that. And again, this is what it means to be open-minded, is you are open to learning. You're open to hearing something new and different, and perhaps creating a new understanding. Okay, and this is not where we are culturally in America right now. We're in the opposite. We're in the throes of everyone just seeing more and more division and more hatred. And again, I'm going to say it, it's on both sides. All right? It's on both sides. So whichever side you're on, if you want unity, if that's what you say that you want, then again, from a yogic perspective, that work happens inside of your heart and your mind. And as you change your heart and your mind, you might find that other people start changing their hearts and their minds, perhaps just by being around you. All right, let's go ahead and switch sides. Left leg over right, down to the right. So again, I never talk about politics to talk about politics. The reason I bring up politics is because generally speaking today, that is an area that most of us can feel a palpable sense of division. Yoga, unity consciousness, oneness consciousness. Oneness does not mean everyone is one except for Nancy Pelosi. All is one except for Donald Trump. All is one except for my ignorant uncle who I have to sit with at Thanksgiving dinner. All is one except for, my gay cousin. Whatever it is, whatever your thing is in creating division. So again, I'm not saying that you need to agree with a different point of view. What I am saying is you need to look in your own heart and mind for that contraction, that division, the thoughts and the feelings and the situations that make you feel that separation. And then you need to do the work. Now, the work is beyond the scope of this class. It's not to say that this, what we're doing, isn't the beginning of that work, because I would say that it is. It's a good start. But asana in traditional yoga is not that powerful a tool, guys. I'm sorry, it just isn't. It is one tool amongst many. And it's a great place to start a yoga practice. It's understandable. We all have a body. We can all see it, right? And so we can begin the change there on the most surface layer of our being. But there's a lot more to a human being than flesh and bone. I hope we all can recognize that. So again, when I say yoga's ultimate target is a transformation of your heart and your mind, I hope you understand that I'm talking about something that really goes beyond just your physical body. It's not to say that the postures can't affect your heart and your mind. They do. But I have not seen one instance of somebody doing postures alone and that being enough for that transformation to be complete. So again, many people within their first couple of years of doing postures, they might pronounce and say, yes, yoga changed my heart and it changed my mind. Doing the postures changed these things. I'm a more loving, understanding person than I was. I'm much more compassionate than I was. I'm much more forgiving. These are all very beautiful, good things. But again, very often, if we are honest with ourselves, we can realize that the work is not done. How do I know if the work is not done? I'm not free of suffering. I'm not free of suffering. And so if I'm still suffering, then I still have work to do. And it doesn't matter if it's personal suffering or if you're suffering for other people, that really doesn't matter. If I'm suffering, then I still have work to do. And so again, there are many tools that we can use in yoga. And if you're a student of mine, and some of you are, and you don't feel like the tools you're using are working, if you don't feel like this process is unfolding for you and your bliss and your joy and your peace aren't flowering, it's a slow process, but we want to feel that process happening. And if that's not happening, then reach out and let me know. And we can discuss your situation one-on-one and figure out what do you need to be doing in order for that process to be happening. Because it should be a flowering, a gradual flowering. So even if we never reach complete enlightenment in this lifetime, we really don't care. Because that flowering is so beautiful. And we just fall in love with life. And it's just a process where day by day, each day is better than the last, and each week is better than the week before. And moment by moment, things are just getting more and more enjoyable. All right, let's unwind. We'll come back onto our back. Let's relax. So again, it's never my intention when I give these talks to try and trigger anybody. I'm not ever trying to upset anybody. I'm not ever trying to be controversial. I am just trying to teach yoga, and I'm trying to use the circumstances we find ourselves in today to do that. And I'm trying to speak in modern parlance, modern terms. If you've spent much time with yoga scriptures, which I have, I've spent a lot of time with them, both on my own and studying with teachers, they are not easily accessible. And sometimes I talk about them in this class. But sometimes I talk just in more sort of modern terms, modern parlance, and I don't spend a lot of time on the Sanskrit and all that kind of stuff. I just sort of break it down in a very straightforward way. And today's talk was like that. Now, I hope you found it valuable. I hope you found it helpful. And if something confused you, or again, you had a strong reaction or whatever, you want to talk with me, I'm happy to speak with you anytime. Okay? What people often do is they don't speak with me again. They just go and speak with my boss or something like that, or they write me a nasty note. Again, this is division. So if we have a difference of opinion with somebody, instead of assuming the worst of them and trying to cancel them, this isn't the yogic way. This isn't yoga. This isn't bringing things together. This is, again, separation. Rather than doing that, we should try reaching out. We should give people the benefit of the doubt. We should ask questions and try and understand. Okay, that's my 2 cents. And that's after studying this stuff for several decades now, okay, with some of the best teachers around. So I hope that was helpful. Let me know if there are any questions, and let me know if there's any way I can help support you on your path. These are stressful times. There's a lot going on, and I think ultimately it's for the good, but we may have to go through quite a bit of change, and generally the ego finds change stressful. So thank you all. Have a lovely evening. Thank you, Sibley. I hope to see you all again soon. And have a lovely week. Oh, I'll be having a satsang on Sunday in the park in Decatur Cemetery. We're going to be outside practicing yoga where it's safe. So if you'd like to join me, reach out. I'll give you the details. All the details are on my Patreon page, so you can see them there. We're going to do some yin, yoga nidra, and some chanting. All right? Hope to see you there. Thanks, Deborah. Good seeing you. Thank you to everyone else. Take about 6 minutes in Shavasana. Thanks, Meredith. Take 6 minutes in Shavasana, at least 6 minutes, longer if you'd like, okay? Thank you, Lindley. I'll see you all next time.